Well, folks, here we are in the Tyropian Valley here in Jerusalem, also called the Valley of the Cheesemakers. And of course, you can see behind me over here are the remains of 2,000-year-old Jewish shops. And of course, looking at the road that we are on right here is a 2,000-year-old road. No doubt Jesus and his disciples would have walked these very pavements right here as they made their way up to the temple. 2,000 years ago, they would have came here to buy and sell doves, sheep, goats. But religious Jews 2,000 years ago would come here and buy a half shekel. And they would buy the half shekel, then they would make their way up to the Temple Mount, to the temple, give that half shekel to the priest, and then they were allowed, of course, to go into the temple complex itself. But when the Romans came into the city 2,000 years ago, in 70 AD, they destroyed this very city. Of course, what you can see behind me over here are a pile of stones. These stones are left over from the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. When the Romans under General Titus destroyed this city, they pushed those stones over the walls, and they came down with such tremendous force that you can see how it caved the road beneath. It caved the road right in beneath. And so you can still see that destruction some 2,000 years later. And of course, this was prophesied by Jesus himself in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. They're over there on the Mount of Olives, just across from where we are right now, and the disciples are looking at Jesus and telling Jesus how magnificent, how beautiful the temple was. And of course, he wasn't impressed. Jesus looked at them and said, "Seest thou not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." And of course, even till this very day, 2,000 years later, you cannot find one trace of the temple, because Jesus said there will not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Of course, General Titus, the son of the Roman Emperor Vespasian, they're on Mount Scopus, and they're pretty much scoping out the place. And so, of course, Titus's father Vespasian, who was the Roman emperor at that time, said, "Listen, we need to rebuild Rome. We need to refinance and build Rome, because Nero let it burn down in 64 AD. And so General Titus takes the 10th Roman Legion here into the city, and he said, "Gentlemen, we need all the gold from that temple." So they come down Mount Scopus through the Kidron Valley and to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and they destroyed the temple in 70 AD. And this is the reason why you see these stones right behind me right here. And folks, you're looking at tangible evidence of the Roman destruction of the temple as prophesied by Jesus in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse. I am touching tangible proof, tangible evidence of Jesus' prophecy in Matthew 24 that was fulfilled 40 years after he ascended back up into heaven. The Romans destroyed the temple. They ripped the gold, which was molded right into that white limestone rock. They got the gold off of that temple. They took roughly about 50 tons of gold and silver from the temple. They bring all the temple treasures back to Rome. And how do you think the Roman Colosseum was built? Where did they get the money for that? From the temple in Jerusalem. How do they finance the rebuilding of Rome that Nero allowed to burn down? The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. So they got 50 tons of gold and silver from that very temple. So we're looking at tangible evidence right behind me over here of the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Again, looking at the remains of 2,000-year-old streets over here. Jesus and his disciples would have walked these very streets over here. Again, you're looking at a better shot here of the shops over here. And then, of course, when you look up over here, you can see the remains of an arch. You can see the remains of that arch over there. That arch is called Robinson's Arch, because that bridge came from here all the way over to the lower level of the city 2,000 years ago. And so Jesus' prophecy, folks, came to pass 40 years after he ascended back up into heaven. And so there it is, tangible evidence of the second temple destruction. Now, those stones that you're looking at right there, they are not a part of the temple. They are not a part of the temple. They were just stones from the retaining wall of the temple. Remember, Jesus said, you're not going to find one trace of the temple. And again, that was fulfilled. They cannot find one single stone from the temple. You know, they've asked many Israeli archaeologists here in the area, have you found any trace of the temple whatsoever, any stones, any beams, anything from the temple? And they said they have not found one single stone from Herod's temple. Again, Jesus' prophecy, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So folks, these are the streets that you're looking at right here. And again, notice that these streets have been caved right in. They've been caved right in. And the destruction of the temple was just absolutely incredible. And you know, of course, according to the Jewish historian Josephus Flavius, he told us that there were roughly about 1 million Jews who died in that campaign. Now, some believe that that's an inflated number, but we don't know for sure. But again, the amount of loss of life was absolutely catastrophic in this city 2,000 years ago. And yet it was on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, that the second temple was destroyed. But backing up to 586 BC, it was also on Tisha B'Av, August 9th, the 9th day of Av, that Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. And Tisha B'Av, 70 AD, the second temple was destroyed as well. So the Romans wanted that money. They were impressed by the temple. As a matter of fact, Titus didn't even want to destroy the temple. I mean, it was just, he said, I've traveled all over the world, and I've never seen a more impressive structure than this Jewish temple. Unfortunately, he had to follow the orders of his dad, the Roman Emperor Vespasian, and of course, they had to destroy the temple. And that temple came down stone by stone, ladies and gentlemen. It was torn down, and not one trace of it can be found today. So again, I'm walking over here, and I am touching, folks. I am touching tangible evidence of the destruction of the Roman destruction.